Hello and welcome everyone to another one of my The Man in the High Castle videos. Now this is going to be the first in a series of videos in which I'll be discussing my speculations and thoughts on the third season of the show. So in these videos I remind you quickly of where we left our characters on the second season of the show and where I expect the third season to take them, or in some cases what all the possible scenarios that I can imagine for each character happens to be. I'll also discuss some of the possible arcs and some fan theories on the third season and my thoughts on those possible arcs and theories. Now I'll be doing that in no particular order, so if you want me to talk of a certain character or a certain theory in my next video, make sure you leave me a comment down below. But before I start here, I'd like to remind you that you can find a few videos on the show on my channel, starting with a recap of the first season and passing by my review of the second season, a video on how I think Tagomi travels between realities, another one on the renewal of the show for the third season, and finally a theory video on John Smith, his inclinations and his motives. Now I'm also working on a recap video of the second season that I'm hoping you will all like, and I'm hoping it would help by the time you're getting ready to watch the third season of the show. Before I venture into my thoughts on what's going to happen in the third season, there is one thing I recently noticed as I went back to watching the second season of the show. Now it has something to do with what Hawthorne told Juliana about her being the same in every reality he has watched her in. The same behavior, the same consistency of mind. Now as I rewatched the second season, it actually kind of hit me, and I was so alarmed that I didn't notice it in the first place. Juliana didn't just help allow the film to get delivered to Berlin by killing Dixon on the finale of the second season, but she actually did way more than that. Her counterpart in our reality is the one who sneaked the film out and gave it to Tagomi in the first place. It's like this whole thing started with her and ended with her. I know a lot of people probably noticed that way before I did, but I guess binge watching 10 episodes the first time around without sleep did not help me notice such a detail. But with that being said, let's get back to the subject of this video and my speculations of the third season of The Man in the High Castle. Here we go.
1.
Now the show's second season left us with a couple of cliffhangers, or rather questions, the first of which happens to be, who is that girl we saw greeting Juliana and referring to her as her sister? I know we all know that happens to be Trudy, but the question is, which Trudy? A lot of fans claim that there's a 0% chance she's the Trudy from the main or core reality of the show. Probability theory has taken a hit here, considering I don't believe we should be certain of something of the sort unless we're actually writing for the show. The theory in Trudy is based on the fact that she was shot by the Japanese and before Juliana's eyes, but there is a major what-if question here. There's also the fact that Juliana seemed to need a push from the get-go, which is exactly what Hawthorne, aka the Man in the High Castle, did with her on the second season. He never told her she was supposed to go to New York and find Dixon, but instead he gave her all the information and allowed her to make her decision to find the guy and change the dark future of San Francisco. As a matter of fact, he had her under the impression she was going to be killed by Gary, Lem, and Karen all the way until she escaped their grip on her very own. He even explained to her at the very end of the season how he knew that she would change things, not because she's resistant and maybe not even because she cares about them, but because of her basic good nature. So in a manner of speaking, it could have all been a setup from the start. Now in my theory about reality hopping, I assume that the hopper's counterpart should be dead in the reality he or she happened to be moving to. But what if we just extend the pool a bit and lose the word dead, replacing it with just unavailable? That would open up a whole lot of possibilities, including one where Trudy of the show's reality hopped to another reality, and the moment she was killed, that was only another Trudy who took her place on the show's reality temporarily. That does not necessarily mean that I am discarding, or that we should discard the fact that the Trudy we saw on the season 2 finale could be from another reality. But that would raise the question of why. Why would she leave her reality, her family, and the resistance in such a reality to move to the show's reality and play sisters with Juliana, who is not really her sister? I guess we'll come to find out the truth in the upcoming season of the show, but I think depending on whether or not she's the core reality's Trudy, her arc would play out. I'm guessing if she were to be a reality hopper, she would probably end up not being a major character on the third season of the show, while if she is actually Juliana's sister, the Trudy we thought was dead, she would stick around and play a greater role. As I mentioned, all we have to do is wait and find out.
2.
Let's forget for a moment here whether or not we like the character of Frink on the show. Some of us like how the character is portrayed in the show, and some of us don't. It's just a matter of opinion. However, the issue here is not whether you like the guy or not. The issue here is about whether or not he should be back on the third season of the show. Now, the scene that took Frink to his death was pretty straightforward and clear. Bullets were fired on both sides, Frank and Sarah on one end, and Kido and his men on the other, before the entire building went boom. And there it was, this big hole in the ground, right where Frank stood. One that goes to tell us both him and Sarah are probably out of commission. Now, unless he was suddenly able to phase between realities and for the first time in his life, in a non-meditative kind of situation, which would be interesting to see considering this is basically how it seems to have worked for Tagomi and Kudomichi, I don't think he's alive. And going for such a scenario would pretty much completely wreck the concept of reality hopping or traveling or whatever you want to call it. Now, abusing the concept that triggered Tagomi's arc on the second season just to keep a single character on board would do the show no good and would most definitely take away a lot of the credit it had managed to build for itself over the past couple of seasons. Am I saying we should never see Frank again? Not really. In fact, it would be interesting to watch a different version of Frank on the show, one from another reality, and preferably in his own reality. Now that I think about it, maybe we should see the Frank from the reality that Tagomi has been visiting over the course of the second season. You know, the one we actually know historically. There was this one interesting statement that Hawthorne made on the finale that I'm going to mention here and probably keep referring to over the entirety of this video and possibly videos to come on the season 3 subject. The only thing I knew was that you, Juliana Crain, were the only hope any of us had. You asked me if you were in the films. You are. You were. Over and over again. Sometimes I'd see you in the background, somewhere, a protest, a speech, a war zone, maybe, someplace that mattered. I started knowing where to look. You could never stay out of it. Some of the people you knew, I started seeing them too, revolving around you like an atom. But they would change, different behavior, different relationships, different points of view, shaped by their lives. But you were always you. You and your unnatural, consistent mind. So as a matter of fact, and as a result of such a statement, it would be a good idea seeing a different Frink, one who acts differently, believes differently, and has been shaped differently and with different points of view. I liked how the character was portrayed. I understand his convictions and how he was shaped on the show. Sometimes he was a little whiny for my taste, but still, overall, I didn't hate the portrayal. However, I'd most definitely like to see a different version of him, one that suffered less, feels more privileged and more spoiled by life, a different version than the one we've been dealing with over the past couple of seasons.
Three.
So last we saw Joe Blake, he was being taken away by SS soldiers to whatever place they wanted to imprison him. Now, if the show has the chance of multiple season renewals beyond the third, they could have him spend the majority of the third season in a prison cell in a manner that will possibly redefine his character, give him more depth and more character development. As opposed to a lot of fans, I didn't really hate how his character arc played out throughout the second season. My only take on his scenes is that it seemed to be overstretched to kill some extra runtime. However, I did like the transformation in his character, the conflict within. From his attempt to resign his post with Smith on the very first episode of the season, only to be followed by him in Berlin dealing with his daddy issues, discovering the truth about who he is and how he came into existence, rejecting to work with his father before he ends up in Nazi uniform, ready to be his father's son. Nicole as well was an interesting player in his arc. I actually kind of liked her character for one simple reason. So far, she's one of the more enigmatic characters on the show. We have no clue what her true intentions and motives happen to be. All we know is she either cares about Joe or she's just playing one hell of a long con on the guy. I'm pretty sure though there is a good chance she might end up being the one reason Joe could not end up with Juliana anytime soon. That sensual scene close to the end of the second season, that looked like a scene that will some way or the other end up in a pregnancy, something that would keep Joe at bay. Now, the other possible scenario for Joe involves his escape or release, probably the second. He's just too green to stage an escape out of his imprisonment, unless of course John Smith is the one who plans such an escape for him, executes it and gets him out. But if we were to assume he gets released, I'd think he would end up going back to North America, looking for Juliana, or maybe even flying solo and possibly joining in with the resistance, realizing how the only way to get back at everyone, John Smith included, would be to make such a choice. Now, just like the case happens to be with Frink, I'd love to see a different version of Joe, a reality 2.0 kind of Joe. And again, possibly the reality Tagomi has been hopping to, because that one happens to be the one on the other end of the continuum from that of the show. And if that were to happen, I'd love to see his character completely different, changed by everything that happens to vary in that reality from the one the show presents us with. So this is not the last time discussing the third season of The Man in the High Castle here. This is in fact the first in a series of videos. There are a lot of other characters I'm yet to discuss here, and a lot of fan speculations. Now hopefully in my next video I'll be discussing the Smiths and Kido, and possibly one or two fan theories or speculations. I'm thinking I'll be discussing here something about what kind of realities people want to see, what I think about that, and what reality I'd love to see on the show on the third season. I'll also be discussing things about different areas of the world that people want to see, and of course whether or not that's a good idea for the show. But for now, let me know in the comments what you think of this video. If you think there are any other possible arcs for these characters that I've failed to mention here, feel free as well to request me changing the order in which I do the characters on these videos. Now if you have any theories or speculations that you want me to discuss, be it yours or one you read about, feel free to drop me a note in the comments as well. And as usual, it would be much appreciated if you drop me a like if you like the content of this video, and if you subscribe if you want to see more The Man in the High Castle videos on What the Geek. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you soon.